Hello, and welcome to the tutorial Atmospheric Compensation. This video tutorial will cover the steps to remove a CO2 peak using the Atmospheric Compensation tool. At times, infrared spectra show prominent CO2 bands in the MIR region, which might pose problems when processing the spectra. In the given example, there is such a peak in the wave number range between 2250 and 2400. By moving the location cursor, one can clearly see that the intensity of the peak dominates the scaling of the spectra in certain areas of the image. Using an area with a range descriptor, the problematic regions become visible. In order to remove the peak, go to Preprocessing, Atmospheric Compensation. In the lower chart windows, we can already see the spectrum at the current location. We can now navigate through the hyperspectral cube by either moving the crosshair in the chart window or the location cursor in the spectral window. To achieve a satisfying removal of the CO2 peak, one has to make sure that the range in which the peak should be compensated is correctly specified. Then the range can be adjusted by moving the gray crosshair. Once everything is set, we can choose between two approaches to remove the bands. The first approach is to replace the peak by a line which spans the gap between the two gray pivot points. This is done by clicking Apply Linear Interpolation. If you answer the message dialog with Yes, the algorithm is applied to the raw data cube. If we now close the window, we can assess the results of the compensation in the 2D imager. And as we can see, the peak is no longer visible in any of the pixels. The drawback of this approach is that any information within the specified range is deleted, regardless of whether it belongs to the CO2 peak or not. That is what we see happening at this location. And by comparing the spectrum to the one in the spectral collection, we can see that the peak at the wave number 2244.66 is completely deleted. Therefore, the Atmospheric Compensation tool provides a second approach which can be applied as follows. Let's revert the changes and go back to the Atmospheric Compensation window. Again, we open Preprocessing, Atmospheric Compensation. For the second approach, we have to estimate a template CO2 peak, which is derived from the raw data cube, by averaging over all spectra within the specified compensation range. The template will be used to compensate the CO2 peak without compromising other spectral information. So this can be done by clicking Estimate Compensation Model, and the resulting template peak is then displayed in the upper chart window. In certain situations, as is the case in this example, the quality of the template can be increased by using a mask. This way, the estimate is calculated by excluding spectra without the prominent peak. The template can be discarded by moving the crosshair, and after clicking Estimate Compensation Model again, the improved template appears in the upper chart window. By moving the location cursor, we can now see a preview where the original spectrum in red is superimposed with the compensated spectrum in green. At this particular position, the spectrum exhibits a different peak that overlaps the specified compensation range. As we can see, the compensation in this region performs rather poorly, which is due to the fact that the right pivot point resides on the flank of this peak. By moving the crosshair to the right, the range can be adjusted so that the linear baseline is consistent with the background. We now recalculate the model by clicking Estimate Compensation Model again. If we now move the location cursor, we can see that the new model performs much better and that despite some minor artifacts, the CO2 peak is fully removed. In order to apply the compensation to the entire image permanently, do not forget to remove the mask. After that, we simply click on Apply Model and answer the message dialog with Yes. If we now move to the position where the peak overlapped the compensation range, then we can see that only the CO2 bands have been compensated. So, we showed how to remove a CO2 peak using the atmospheric compensation tool. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more tutorials.